Good evening and welcome to the February 11, 2020 Planning Commissioners meeting. If we can have roll call, Shannon, please.
Messina.
Here.
Fleming. Here. Ingalls.
Here.
Utrip.
Here.
Mandel.
Here.
Rumpler. Ward.
Here.
Thank you. If you can all stand and join me in the pledge, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have December 10th, 2019 minutes to review and approve.
Make a motion to approve.
I would like to second that motion.
First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. At this time, public comments. Anyone wishing to speak on any other item other than what's on our agenda this evening is welcome to come up and speak. Okay, no one does. Commission comments.
I think we, did you want,
Someone
sir,
wanna-
did you want to speak? No, I'm just observing. Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Commission comments, anyone?
Oh, yes, yes. I usually say this to the last, but it's suggested that I speak
over
first.
his head.
Last year, we had a PUD that came before us, and in my view, it was a little different than others. It was out in the middle of alfalfa field, and not that it's wrong, but it just got me thinking a little bit. Paved private streets, private sidewalk, gated. I thought, well, is it time for us as a commission to revisit and look at our PUD to see if we would recommend any changes to the council, or if this is something that the comprehensive plan group should do, or whatnot. But it seems to me that it might be an idea for us to visit. I have no asking for no action tonight. I'm just bringing the subject up.
Good. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other comments from the commissioners? No? Staff?
All right, good evening, Commissioners. So for March, we actually just have one public hearing item, so a special use permit will be coming before you. And then, as noted the last few times, we have added this new agenda item, so Sean will be giving you an update on our Envision Coeur d'Alene, which is our comprehensive plan update. So that's all I have for you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you. And are we doing that? Is that just, we don't have a, oh, Sean, okay. You going to do it from down there, or do you want to come up to the podium?
I think I could do it from down
Okay,
here, if that's
great.
okay. All right, so I'd like to thank the Planning Commission, members of the audience, as well as people who are at home and watching this digitally or otherwise through cable. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the Envision Coeur d'Alene project. The last update was December 10th, which you guys just approved the minutes for. So in the interest of time, I won't go through everything that I did last time. I'll just provide more of an update of where we are and what has happened since. But also, for the people that may not know what Envision Coeur d'Alene is, I'd like to read a statement real quick that describes what the process is. So, Envision Coeur d'Alene is the visioning and long-range planning project created to develop a citywide plan and roadmap to our community's future. The project is a collaboration between the City of Coeur d'Alene and Coeur d'Alene 2030. The completed plan will be the City of Coeur d'Alene's state-mandated comprehensive plan from 2020 to 2040 and an update to Coeur d'Alene 2030's vision and implementation plan. So last time I discussed a series of meetings that were held, public kickoff, CAC, focus groups, stakeholder groups, that sort of thing. Anybody who is interested in reviewing that information, it can be found on the project website, which is envisioncda.org. And if you click on the resources page, there is meeting notes for each one of those meetings, so anybody can catch up. I'm also available by phone and by email. That information is on the site as well. So right now, we're working on some website updates and that have been added to the website. One of those is the Growing Better Places game, and everybody should be familiar with that. You guys played it. There was a total of 23 games that were played, and the results of which are available on our website. We're having MIG write us a synopsis of those results, because if you just pull it up and look at it, it kind of looks a little bit messy, but what it is it's an overlaying of all of those 23 games and the results of which to try and identify any clusters and those types of things where it's making sense that some of these land use elements would be employed in the future update of the comprehensive plan. So some items have been added. So there is a current document section, which was there before. There's existing condition reports. So the transportation one has been uploaded. Everyone's welcome to look at that. I know that transportation is a big thing in Coeur d'Alene right now. Everybody's talking about being stuck in traffic and how can we alter the movement of traffic to be more efficient. So the existing conditions report is there. We also had a meeting on December 4th and 5th, which was a great meeting. That information is also online, and there's some supporting materials and a map gallery as well. So what are we working on right now? So we're working on the vision statement, goals, and policy and action items, and we are generating feedback from our city departments. And furthermore, we're going to be putting together a survey to bring this out to the public to get their feedback on it as well. That will come back before Planning Commission and as well as the public. Let's see here. So here in the near future, there's a leadership brief meeting, which will be held February 26th. That will be at noon. That will involve City Council, Planning Commission, and a couple of the Coeur d'Alene 2030 leadership team. And that will, the agenda will be placed online and will be available to everyone. So the leadership brief will be followed by a meeting with department heads to identify any additional elements that may need to be added, and the objectives and action items will be discussed after the public survey is completed. So that is forthcoming in a next following step. Bridge Economics will be reviewing their findings for existing conditions in the traded sector, and that is a regional exercise. That will be in a following meeting. We're thinking that will be March sometime, and our best guess right now is March 17th or 18th, but that is subject to change. Just be aware that that will be coming up. That will also involve the CAC meeting number 3 and focus group number 2 meetings. In the meantime, staff will be identifying public engagement opportunities for the spring and summer with quadrant meetings, pop-up events, that sort of thing. This is in addition to online feedback that we will get, and that will help target those who are not so computer savvy so that we get a broad representation of our community. And moving ahead from then, the next step would be preliminary scenario planning and also community priorities workshop, which would be window meeting 5, but that's looking out pretty far. We don't know what those dates will be. So with that concludes my update of where we're at. And if any Planning Commission has any comments, I'd like to turn it over to them.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thank you. One question, timeline. Are we still kind of looking pretty good on our timeline for the end results and given all the meetings and everything else?
Yes, we are looking good. We were probably about a month behind. We were expecting to be about where we're at now, but with the holidays, everybody heads out of town or has things to do, so there's a lull there, and so we'll have a little bit of catch up to do, but not too much.
Sure. One other suggestion, perhaps, although we're still in winter here, summer's coming and we're all going to be somewhat busy. So I suggest if this commission knows that they're going to be out of town for any time, it might be let Sean know about it, given we have so many meetings coming up. So if you can just keep Sean abreast of
Yes,
what
that
you
would
might-
be very helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Okay. We have an administrative item. I guess Tammy's going to let us know what that's all about.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, actually, I don't need that yet. So this is a fairly straightforward request, and it's a request for an interpretation of the approved design for Coeur d'Alene Place. And the location of this would be all of the Coeur d'Alene Place Plan Unit Development. And the owner and applicant is SCLU Schneidmiller Land Company, and Kevin Schneidmiller is also here for this and another item this evening. So this evening, SCLU Schneidmiller Land Company is asking the Planning Commission for an interpretation to allow for flexibility in the approved architecture design concepts for the Coeur d'Alene Place Plan Unit Development. And in January of '94, the Planning Commission did approve the request for the preliminary plat and PUD for Coeur d'Alene Place, which was about a 600-acre phased multi-use development. And during that time, and initial building permits coming in, the home style were craftsman style. However, there wasn't a definitive design submitted at that time, and it wasn't until July of 2005 when they identified that craftsman style homes would be built. And let's see, so more recently, they've had a request to have modern style homes. And on pages 2 and 3 of your staff report, I've included information, and the design concepts that have been built throughout Coeur d'Alene Place for the craftsman style. And the Coeur d'Alene Place project has its own architectural review board that does review homes prior to building permit applications that are submitted. And the recent Aspen Homes project within Coeur d'Alene Place 30th edition, referred to as Trailside at Coeur d'Alene Place, has introduced a more modern style for projects that have been well received by buyers and builders. So Greenstone Kootenai would like to allow more of these houses to diversify the mix of housing styles and open up the community to additional buyers. So the request this evening is to expand, not only just having the craftsman style home, but also allow for a modern style element, as noted on page 4 of your staff report. I've given you 2 examples of that. So the Planning Commission must consider this request to approve or deny the interpretation request to allow additional design flexibility for future homes within the Coeur d'Alene Place PUD and allow modern style in addition to the craftsman style home design.
Questions? John?
Thank you, Tammy. So I am very comfortable with this. You know, I'm confident that this developer knows enough about their product and their business and the future phases of Coeur d'Alene Place, that they're not going to do something that, you know, is going to detract from the desirability of that. And, you know, architecturally, I have no problem with the homes and whatnot. You know, I raised one point here, though, that is a little bit of a kind of a procedural question, I guess, or in this case, you know, this Trails Edge, or whatever it's called, Trails, whatever, that's out there on Corsellis and a street called Theirs. There's
Trailside at Coeur d'Alene Place.
Yeah, so there's 4 of those houses that are already built, that are modern style. And, you know, just stone's throw from where I live, there's one on Corsellis, or Cornwall, at 6814 Cornwall. It's been there for 6 years. So procedurally, if we've got, I guess, 5 of these already built, isn't it a little bit late to ask for an interpretation?
Well, staff just wanted to make sure that we had this, went through the correct procedure, since we noticed that there was a different building style in there, and make sure we had it in the record, that they had asked for that modern style home in addition to the craftsman.
And that's great. If we're just trying to clarify and just make sure that we're doubly safe and all that, that's great. I guess a question for staff over at the table, maybe, for my education, I guess, is that, you know, we see PUDs, we have had 6-8 of them at least in the last 6-8 months. And we see similar photos that you have or artist renderings that you have in the package for this. And in my understanding, I've always taken that as illustrative, if you will, illustrative, not necessarily to be a lock. You know, we lock in things like, you know, setbacks and lot sizes and street widths and things of that nature that I would certainly think, you know, one would need to come back to this body for any, you know, deviation during, you know, down the road. You know, is something like the photos that were procedurally, I mean, are these illustrative, or was it a lock-in that the homes have to be, you know, a certain look? Because to me, that's kind of overreaching.
Well, back in '94, when it was approved, it didn't look like they submitted any conceptual designs. It was fairly open. And then in 2005, as we went back through the record, we saw that they did note in there that it was going to be craftsman style. And so you're correct, it was more loose as far as that style, didn't hold them to 3 specific designs. But with this being kind of a significant change in the design, as I mentioned, we just wanted to make sure it was on the record because it is definitely different than the craftsman style. But understand their request to want to add this to what they're proposing.
I guess, I get to sum it up, my point up is, I get it, in my sense, this shouldn't have to come back. I question why this is even here, I guess. And
Mr.
if we're
Chairman?
just being doubly safe, that's great, but
Go ahead, Hillary.
If I may, so this is so in the zoning code, it specifically says for PUD projects that with the final development plan, they would submit the architectural details. And it does specify the architectural style. Coeur d'Alene Place preceded some of those requirements, and so that's why we didn't have the level of detail initially. But as we were kind of following through with building permits, realizing, wait, is there really anything that ties it to craftsman or not? And then we found the 2004. So there was a little confusion on that one, but the other ones do have it. So maybe that's another thing to look at in the code with the PUD requirements, is maybe it doesn't need to specify a style. But I think a lot of the PUD projects to date have wanted one, because they're usually smaller. Coeur d'Alene Place is our biggest, but they tend to have a certain look, and then they want to hold all the other homes to that same style. So that's been historically how it's happened, but we can certainly discuss that with the commission at a separate time.
So if a PUD comes to us and the applicant mentions a certain style and gives us some renderings, I guess it's up to the applicant to say, well, these are the styles we want, and we approve that PUD, lack of better words, not a condition, but we approve that PUD and say, all right, here's 2 styles. And then during the course, and they have a homeowners association that reviews the plans, which I would imagine that homeowners association would say, well, here are the 2 plans that, or the styles that were approved, and anything different than that, would it have to come back to us again, or are we tying in a developer, and if he wishes to be tied in with illustrations of here's the styles, so be it, and if anything changes, then they have to come back? Is that?
Staff is pretty flexible with what's craftsman, but craftsman and modern are very different. So
Yeah.
we don't hold them to the exact images that are presented in the staff report, but if it's, verging on completely different architectural style, then we do let them know that, hey, the PUD is this, and here's your options for changing that or modifying it if you'd like to.
Okay.
I think a lot of this has to do with the longevity of a project. BlackRock is suffering the same thing. They had to give up on the craftsman because, 15 years in a rollout, nobody wants that anymore, and they're moving away from it. So I think that, I don't know that we should weigh in, whether it's craftsman or not. That's the offering that the builder's giving us. But in 25 years, we've moved on, thank God. So evolution, and I think that we just need to bless this, but I don't think we should weigh in on aesthetics. That's what the design review panel's for. We try to stay out of that game. We're really about rules and regulations. But if they want us to bless it, and maybe the homeowners need that blessing, because they say, hey, wait a second, I thought this was a craftsman development, but Coeur d'Alene Place is massive. And if you really pick at it, there's colonial, there's all manner of mix and blend. It's not all craftsman if you're a purist. So, you know, I'm saying, yes, let's do it, because our younger buyers want this. And the saleability of these units is based on a younger, hopefully fresher, and I'm getting it even from older people who said, I'm done with craftsman, I'm moving on, light, bright, tall. You know, they're progressive, so we have to be progressive. But I really don't think we should weigh in. I agree that John, you know, I don't think we should be part of this scenario. But if it helps the developer, good for them, So do we just make a motion to approve this?
Yep.
I guess we should.
Go ahead. Simple motion, I take it, Hillary? Okay.
Yeah, simple, we approve the interpretation requests made by the developer to allow additional design flexibility for the future homes within Coeur d'Alene Police PUD, and to allow the homes to have a modern style, whatever that is, elements as noted above, in addition to the craftsman style that has been approved for the project.
I have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Next, we're going to go into our public hearings, and there are just two, and there are some sign-up sheets up in the front here. If you haven't signed up and you wish to speak on either one of them, please do so, and then at the appropriate time, I'll call you up, and we'll listen to your comments. Come on up, Hillary.
All right, so I'm just coming up for the beginning of this, and then Kelly is going to be taking the lead on presenting for the first item. But as you can see in the agenda, so we have two amendments before you. So they're totally unrelated, but they're both in the zoning code. And so what we're going to have is two separate presentations. You'll need two separate motions and recommendations to City Council on that. But Kelly Setters, who I think you have seen before, potentially our Deputy City Clerk, is also liaison to our city's Child Care Commission. And so she is experienced in matters related to the in-home daycare. So I want to have her present what we're looking at changing, and staff is very supportive of these amendments. With that, I'll turn it over to Kelly. Thank you.
Good evening, how are you?
Good evening.
Okay, so I'll start with, the Child Care Commission is requesting a recommendation from the Planning Commission on the proposed code amendments to sections that are identified in your staff report. The background of the Coeur d'Alene's home occupation regulations fall within the Municipal Code Title 17 of the Zoning Code. As such, that requirement, input, and recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council for the amendments as proposed. The city has a Child Care Commission, as you know, and is one of 8 cities in the state of Idaho that requires additional certification and background checks for child care providers. The Child Care Commission was formed to oversee the rules and regulations regarding licensing child care in-home and facilities to ensure quality child care. At the November 25th, 2019 Child Care Commission meeting, it was decided to seek approval from the Planning Commission to make changes to the current code to provide that home-based child care facilities will be authorized one non-residential employee to meet the city and state standards that providers need to be within sight and sound of children at all times. Since 2010, in-home child cares have declined, which decreases the availability at the least expensive care option for working families, especially for infants. The United Way organization has created a task force to seek ways to encourage more child care options within the area. It noted in an article in the press on October 11, 2019, that there is an actual inventory shortage of child care options. So I think this change would be a way the city can help in this shortage. In-home child care facilities may have up to 9 children with one provider. Without an additional provider on site, it can put a provider in violation of state requirements of being within sight and sound of children at all times. Let's say if a child has to go to the restroom, or the provider has to go to the restroom. So this would help that situation. The current home occupation code does not allow home occupations to have an employee unless they're residents and a family member in that home. The commission is seeking approval for only childcares to have the one non-residential option. We wouldn't want it for across the board for all home occupations. Allowing one employee would generate 2 additional vehicle trips to and from the facility each day. That would not have a significant impact on the neighborhood. Home occupations are limited to maximum of 20 trips per day. The total trips still stay within this threshold. The proposed code amendment also classifies that an outdoor play area must be provided for in-home facilities. This is also a slight deviation from the other home occupation businesses that are not allowed to operate outdoors. And we'd like to also clarify that in-home childcare facilities are not allowed to operate in an apartment building or condominium where there is common ownership unless they obtain a special use permit. So the purpose of the proposed is to come into compliance with the city and state standards that children are always within sight and sound of the provider and stay within the mandated ratio. To conclude, the commission should recommend to city council that the proposed code amendments to municipal code sections 1706, 715, 720, and 725 should be adopted. And I stand for any questions you may have.
My question, thank you. I'm fully supportive of efforts to make early childhood care more available and accessible. If we change this code, then the in-home child care providers, what burden is it on them to then do the background checks and the business insurance and having other employees that are non-residents? Is that
That they
shifting
would
the
have an
burden
impact to do
to?
a background check, but they have to already do that with people that live in the home as well, so. It would just be that additional cost, which would be worth it for them to be in compliance with the
The
state.
rest of the, okay.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
state and city codes that,
I have a
in
question
place.
as well.
Sure.
As far as the licensing requirements, the actual daycare provider currently, there's a licensing requirement in place for that person. And then, of course, the current situation allows for family members or someone related to also be a second person that can help
yes.
out.
And everyone that lives in the home has to have a background check and a license. There's called a
So-
non-provider license.
So will this potential non-resident employee also face the same licensing requirements?
Yes.
Okay.
They would be considered a teacher because they would be alone with the children.
Okay.
So they have they have to do education, they have to have CPR every 2 years, so it's restrictive.
Perfect. Thank you.
Questions?
Okay, no other questions at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few people signed up. First is Iris Singler. Please come on up, Iris. Nice to see you again.
Hello there. I'm Iris Sigler. I am the chairperson for the Child Care Commission, but it's kind of twofold. I'm also a...
I have to swear you in.
You got to swear me in?
Yeah,
Okay,
just
go
state
ahead.
your name again,
Iris Sigler.
and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go right ahead, Sergeant. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm twofold. On top of being the chairperson, I am also an in-home private preschool located on 20th Street. I am one of the original that applied for a special use permit and actually asked at that time to have an employee. So I was licensed in 1985, and then 10 years later, I came before this Planning Commission, and there were 7 of us who took Planning and Zoning 101. We took classes, so we kind of learned how all this worked. It's probably all changed by now. But we went through that process, and I think there's only 3 of us left, but I was the only one who asked for an employee at that time. It really makes a big difference. You can be busy with another child, and having another set of eyes makes a big difference. And now our state is saying, in order for us to be stronger, that we need to be doing this. And so I'm hoping you guys will vote to allow this. At the time I did it, I had to jump through a few more hoops than what is being required. I had to say that they could only be there for so many hours. There had to be a special parking place allowed for that employee that was not on the street. So it's a little different, and I didn't, knowing these changes are coming now, I don't know how you guys are addressing that, or you're gonna let them worry about it. If a home child care facility decides to have an employee, it's up to them, but they do have to jump through certain hoops if they want to be legal. And that requires going through and getting your tax number and going through and contacting the Idaho state and letting them know what you're up to. So it opens up a can of worms, because I do pay quarterlies on top of the little bit I make. It's a whole different ballgame than just working by yourself. But I feel that the quality is the best, and I think that we deserve that for our children in Idaho. And after talking today with Beth Oppenheimer, who is the president of the North Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children, I don't know if any of you have been following what's been going on legislatively, but we're not doing so good in our state. And it's not going to change. The only thing that's probably going to get passed this year is the more stringent background check. So that means they're kind of turning it over to our cities, and they look up to us, which, with all the politics and things that happen down in Boise, it's pretty neat up here in North Idaho to be looked up to, because we have such a strong child care ordinance, and we're doing such a good job to take care of our children up here. Not that we can't always improve, but tweaking this and letting this go forward to allow them to have an employee is a big deal. So I'm hoping you guys will look at that. Okay?
Any questions of ours? No? Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Ken Stark is on the list? Or is that Carrie? I'm sorry. You don't look like a Ken.
No.
So, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, and just state your name, I'm sorry.
I'm Carrie Stark,
Right.
and I'm the Community Impact Director for United Way of North Idaho. Since 2016, we've focused on the intersection of quality childcare and the economic mobility of working families, which led us to establish the Early Care and Education Task Force, referenced by Kelly Setters. This works to connect the many systems of early care and to deliver a data-driven approach to improve the educational and employment outcomes of working families. Accessible, high-quality early education provides substantial social and economic benefits to children, to families, and communities. From birth to age 5, we know that 85% of a child's brain is developed, and the nurturing interactions that he or she has with caregivers lays the foundation for their future relationships, their learning, and their resilience. Access to affordable and quality care also allows families to stay engaged in the workforce and to maintain financial stability, and it also has a positive impact on employers by reducing absenteeism. According to the Committee for Economic Development, as was referenced in Kelly's presentation, the child care market in Idaho is estimated to have a direct and spillover economic impact of $240 million and over 11,000 jobs. Since 2010, in-home child cares have declined 27.5%, and the decline is particularly significant for working families. This is because in-home providers are more likely to care for infants and toddlers, which is more costly in the center-based facilities, and they're much more affordable type of care compared to a non-home-based centers, and they're more likely to provide flexible schedules of care. In Idaho, over 80% of child care is provided by sole proprietors in home-based settings. So United Way has used the ALICE report since 2016, and the ALICE report is an acronym for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. It's the working poor, to understand the true financial struggle of North Idaho households. We know from this data that 41% of households in Coeur d'Alene struggle to make ends meet. We know that many of these households with children are working 2 and 3 jobs, often in healthcare, retail, and hospitality, in non-standard hours, and need the flexibility and affordability of home-based childcare to meet their family's care needs. We also know that many proprietors of in-home childcare are ALICE as well, and fluctuations in enrollment, business costs, wages, and the cost of living can threaten the solubility of their own businesses and plunge them into poverty. Investing in the child care workforce is part of United Way of North Idaho's collective impact strategy to increase the quality, quantity, and affordability of childcare in North Idaho, and we have, over the last year, leveraged funds to support licensing compliance for these providers as well. So, as mentioned, the background checks, et cetera. So the proposed rule facilitates the empowerment of local people to become economically self-sufficient by establishing and maintaining in-home childcares that, as Iris mentioned, crucially deliver a quality and nurturing environment to our youngest citizens. Investing in early care and education benefits working families with children today and lays the foundation for a healthy and thriving population tomorrow. So we're in full support of this rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it. No question. Thank you. Samantha Tuscan wishes to speak. State your name and I'll swear you in, Samantha.
Samantha Tushkan.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Samantha Tushkan with Panhandle Health District. I run the Child Care Resource Center there. I also get to wear multiple hats. I am on the Child Care Commission as a representative there, and then I get to co-chair the Early Care and Education Task Force with Carrie at the United Way. So I am appreciative that you are listening to this proposal here today that the Commission has been taking forward. I have the opportunity to work with child care providers directly, as the role of the Child Care Resource Center is to provide direct support with coaching and technical assistance for child care providers to raise the quality of care and education. We also go in with compliance issues. If they're having complaints, we go in to provide support. So if the health inspector goes in and finds that they're out of supervision or ratio due to this specific code or others, when they haven't been able to meet their supervision, then we go in to try and brainstorm. So I've been able to see direct challenges that child care providers are facing with this code specifically in the city of Coeur d'Alene and statewide. And our home-based providers are finding great challenges with this because they don't have the support and be able to hire an employee to be able to support them in this role. Many of our home-based providers, they don't have a relative or a husband or something like that that's there and available during childcare hours, because in the city of Coeur d'Alene specifically, we only have one provider that actually is out of normal hours of what we call that. They work 6 to 6. We only have some that work the odd hours that are after 6 or on weekends for families currently. We did have more, but that is a care time that we're currently seeking and recruiting for additional hours, because home-based providers, with the constraints of what they're having put on them right now with regulatory and just working with being in the ALICE population like Carrie talked about, it's hard for them to be able to maintain care and provide that, even though it's such a niche of care that is so needed in our communities. So I appreciate you taking the time to consider this proposal. I greatly support it and hope that you will too.
I have a
Stand for
question.
questions.
I have a question. Since you are in all these different elements that are so connected with this grassroots community, once this is approved, will you then outreach to them and tell them that now you're able to have somebody, and I encourage you to have somebody backing you up within your business?
Yeah, so my staff that I have at the Child Care Resource Center, we have a resource specialist who specifically specializes in business practices. So in the planning of hopefully that this code would pass, we've been working on messaging and outreach strategies, so that way we can support the staff in what would be required if you have staff members, and working with the labor and things like that to be able to, because the state already allows home-based providers to have employees in their care. So we have the resources available to get out to the city of Coeur d'Alene home-based providers to support them in this process.
So you'll aid them through that?
Yes.
If they're doing 12-hour days, they don't have a lot of left in them to
Yes.
keep fighting the good fight.
Yes,
Thank
and many of them that have already, we've had providers specifically reach out. When I brought this proposed code to the commission, it was because we've had direct home-based providers say, I want to be higher quality, I would like to have a staff, but I am not able to. And so we have some already seeking that information if this would pass.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Peter, go ahead.
You had mentioned here that the ongoing education requirement for providers. Could you talk a little bit about the ongoing education?
Yeah, it's for the city of Coeur d'Alene, childcare providers to have 10 hours a year of ongoing education. 5 hours have to be face-to-face, so in a live class. 5 hours can be online. But if they receive the Idaho Child Care Program, so subsidies from the state, they're accepting a child who receives those subsidies, they're required to have 12 hours of ongoing education. And then the state also has a program called the Steps to Quality. It's programs that are voluntarily wanting to be higher education and align with the national accreditation program. And so those programs are taking 20 hours or more of training a year. So the state, Idaho Stars, which is the Child Care Resource Program falls under, they offer scholarships and education reimbursement for those programs on any of those levels to be able to take those training hour requirements. But those are the different levels of training that providers are doing. So minimally in the city of Coeur d'Alene, they're doing 10.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have no one else on the list. Is anyone who wishes to speak that isn't on the list? This is the time for you to come up. If not, I'm going to close public testimony and bring it to the commissions for any discussion and a simple motion. Is it a simple motion or a roll call? Roll call, okay.
I'd like to go ahead and propose a motion
Okay.
to approve this. I'll read it straight from the decision point, that the commission should recommend to city council that the proposed code amendments to municipal code section 17.02, I should put my glasses on so I could read it, .065 and 17.03.050 and 17.44.195 be adopted.
Are those the right codes?
Those are different codes than I've
Yeah,
got.
we need to be the
I got
1706.
1706.
I'm
That's the
sorry,
next one.
I had
It's
ordered.
okay, we just
Yes.
approved cottage-style daycare.
Yes, yeah, no, I do apologize.
He wants to go
I was writing down
Kidding.
all my notes on other pages too. Okay, so the commission, let me do this again.
No problem. We have a motion?
The motion is that the commission should recommend to city council that the proposed code amendments to municipal code sections 17.06.715 and 17.06.720 and 17.06.725 should be adopted.
Okay,
There.
I have a
I'm on
motion.
the correct
Second.
page.
I have a second. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. Appreciate it. Thank you for all the work you do with child
Yes.
care. Welcome back, Hillary.
Thank you. So this is part 2 of the zoning code amendments, and I misspoke earlier. So for the March meeting, we will also have another zoning code amendment. So the design review procedures, we'll be bringing that to you.
Great. I love all these zone changes and
Right,
updates.
cleaning
You
up the
guys are
code.
working. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this item is related to storage of heavy equipment on residential properties. So it is a very small change, but a very important change to our zoning code. So as you can see, the decision point here relates to these sections of the zoning code related to heavy equipment parking and storage on residential properties. So a little background, we get routine complaints. Code enforcement receives those from property owners about having heavy equipment stored on neighboring properties in residential zones. And so that has come to our attention, and because it's not in the code right now, it's more difficult for them to enforce. And so this would be very clear in specifying that if it's commercial operations versus an active construction site, that you can't store it there. If it's commercial, heavy equipment, it should be stored in a commercial or industrial zone where it's appropriate. So this is the heavy equipment definition that has been added, and so you can see that it is very clear on the type of vehicles, motorized machinery that is for industrial or construction uses, and then it kind of goes on to specify it's not limited to all of those. So I think it's really important for us to make this amendment. It really would help preserve the residential neighborhoods. It would help protect property values as well, to make sure that we can keep these commercial, quasi-commercial, industrial uses out of our residential areas. And so that is the purpose of bringing this before you this evening. And so here is the decision point recommendation to bring this forward to City Council with recommendation for approval from Planning Commission. And these are the sections of the code, so the 1702-065, 1703-050, and 17-44195.
The ones that I read.
Yes. So you're ready to make this motion, I'm sure.
How does the
With-
city get teeth on something like this? Because there are streets that we have that are prone to, they've got their mobile homes on it, and then comes the horse trailer, then comes the heavy lifter bulldozer, and it just accumulates. And what are the teeth that we have as a city that actually enforces this?
So by getting it in the code is the first step. So we have
Okay.
to be very specific on what is or is not allowed. And then it's something where it's typically complaint-based. And so then we can turn over to code enforcement. But we have been going after properties that are violating the code. If they have people that are living in an RV where they're not allowed to live and they're connecting into sewer, so things like that. Obviously, if people are parked over sidewalks routinely and someone complains about that, we can enforce that. Storage of heavy equipment will now be something that we can enforce.
But it doesn't start with the city, it's really responding to a
It
complaint.
is, yep, that's how it's been, and
Okay.
just because we only have 1.5, I believe it's still 1.5 time
Jeez.
code enforcement, full-time equivalent code enforcement officers on the street, and so they can't just go around and patrol it, but
Yeah.
we do get quite a few complaints, and then those are followed up. So obviously, if people see these violations, once this hopefully is approved, then we can crack down on that as well.
I take it we don't allow such heavy equipment on street parking. There is an ordinance for that.
Correct, yes, and we have, 48 hours for any vehicle just to be parked on the street anyway without moving it, so that's boat trailers, boats, vehicles, if they're not being used, and so heavy equipment is already restricted unless it's part of an active construction site.
Okay, great. Okay.
This does not include boat trailers, boats and boat trailers.
This does not, no, so that's what the definition is really specific, talking
Or,
about.
Like a popcorn wagon or,
Food truck?
food truck.
No, and so we actually had kind of talked about that too, in terms of even, you know.
Not that I
Right.
partial one way or another, I'm just thinking, my dog has taken, my daughter's dog has taken a certain route of late, and it has gone by today a couple places that were, it had a food truck and it looked like a popcorn wagon, but the popcorn wagon was on a low boy, and I don't know if that's permitted or not. And my only concern is if there are some people, residents in town who will not meet this code, that somehow they get notified of it time enough to address it, so it doesn't turn in, like what Lynn was saying, a confrontational item with the city and them.
So the two things you were talking about, I guess it depends on if it's on private property or if it's on the street, but
It's on
both of
private
those.
property.
Okay, so those would be allowed still.
Okay.
And then we also aren't specifying semi-trucks, because that's another thing that's a little bit more difficult, but specifically the heavy equipment that is truly for commercial or industrial operation.
So I could put an RV on my private property, just
Yes.
as long as I didn't hook it up to sewer.
You just can't have somebody living in it.
Not that I plan to, but
Okay,
it's
good.
just,
Any other questions of Hillary? No?
I can make a motion.
Okay, go right ahead.
The commission should recommend to city council that the.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, did we have
public
anyone
comment.
sign up for this? Probably not, I think they
I
were all
have no
related.
sign-up sheet.
Okay,
See
Yeah, I'm
anything?
so
sorry.
it's the same one, but I think everyone signed up just to speak on the childcare.
Okay, there is no one else on
No,
this
and everyone
sheet,
left.
unless there's
So-
another sheet.
All of those left, so I don't think they're here to
Anyone
speak
wanna
on this
speak?
part of the
Nope.
zoning code.
Okay, I'll close public testimony at this
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
I think the
You're welcome.
childcare providers only like construction equipment when they're actually moving, so the kids are entertained for a little bit.
Right, right.
And it wouldn't cover
It's a new
Tonka
place.
trucks.
Tonka trucks.
Okay, so,
Okay, the commission recommends to city council that the proposed code amendments to municipal code section 17.02.065, 17.03.050, and 17.44.195 be adopted.
I have a motion.
I would second that, and for the record, I would say that I live in a craftsman house, and I'd be fine living next to a modern house, but I wouldn't be fine living next to heavy equipment.
Okay, so noted. I have a first and second roll call. Shannon?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Mandel?
Yes.
Lutrip?
yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Thank you. And we've hadn't had a meeting in a while, so we're all getting refreshed again on how
It's
all
actually
this works.
Comedy Central. Yeah, we're at Comedy Central now.
Okay, the next item is,
Last item, right?
yes, Thank you. The applicant is Greenstone, and the location is west of Ramsey, north of Canfield. Proposed 202 lot preliminary plat, Coeur d'Alene Place, S-1-20. And Tammy, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. So again, it's a preliminary plat request for Coeur d'Alene Place 2020, consisting of 189 single-family and 13 townhome lots, and it would be done in 6 phases, totaling 45 acres. And the owner is SCLU Schneidmiller Land Company, and the applicant is Greenstone Kootenai 2. And the decision point is that they are requesting the approval of the 45.05 acre 6-phase subdivision in Coeur d'Alene Place. And it would include single-family and townhome lots. So I'll give you a little bit of general information. The subject property is located west of Ramsey Road, east of West Moselle Drive, and south of Alp Street and north of Hanley Avenue, as depicted on my aerial map. And this is Ramsey Road, and this is West Alps. And it's outlined here in the subject property. And in 2018, a request was brought forward for a preliminary plat that encompassed a portion of this. And so a portion of what is coming forward this evening is a replat of that S-118. So some of it may be a little familiar to you. So the existing Coeur d'Alene Place PUD will govern development, including but not limited to setbacks, open space, street development, per the approvals and modifications as listed under general information and the final development plan. And the staff report will focus on this subdivision request before you this evening. And Coeur d'Alene Place was annexed in 1992 with item A492, and the applicant at that time requested a PUD for that. So this proposed subdivision does consist of 45 acres and is part of the original PUD. So on page 2, I provided all the historical items with the previous actions for Coeur d'Alene Place. And this again is the location map, giving you a little clear picture of the location. And you'll see Wilbur is going to eventually run through here. So I'll go through all 4 of the findings this evening. Finding B7A, that all the general preliminary plat requirements have or have not been met as attested to by the city engineer. And per the city engineer, the preliminary plat submitted contains all of the general preliminary plat elements required by municipal code. And this is the preliminary plat that was submitted. And there will be, I believe, the 13 townhome lots are located here, and the rest are single-family lots. You'll see in the conditions and you'll see in the discussion items from staff or the comments that there will be a pedestrian pathway in this area. And there are tracks for the landscaping that are also noted on the plat if you look a little closer on here. And as I mentioned, it would be phased in 6 phases. So the first phase is here, and this is Wilbur, and the second phase and so on. Finding B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-way, easement, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are or are not adequate. The subject property is bordered by Ramsey Road to the east, and all proposed streets will need to be constructed to city standards. Streets and engineering has no objections to the proposed subdivision. And as far as traffic, Chris Bosley submitted the comments stating the ITE trip generation manual estimates that 202 residential properties may generate 148 and 186 peak hour trips per day. And the total additional generated traffic will likely result in an increase to congestion entering on Ramsey Road. However, it will be built out in 6 phases, providing a significant lead time when a traffic signal will be warranted at the intersection of Wilbur Avenue and Ramsey Road. And a signal for this intersection is currently in design so that the underground work can be installed with this project. And a utility plan was submitted for staff to review. City staff from water, fire, parks, wastewater departments have reviewed the application request in regard to the sidewalks, streets, alley, rights-of-way, easements, utilities, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities. And each department indicated that there are adequate facilities and utilities available to serve this proposed request. Finding B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with all of the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards. And that's per the engineering review for the purposes of the plat. Both subdivision design standards and improvement standards have been vetted for compliance. And all the new streets shall be constructed to the Coeur d'Alene Place PUD-approved street design standards. And finding B7D, that the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do or do not meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. The lots in the proposed preliminary plat meet the minimum frontage of 40 feet per lot, which was approved in 1994 with PUD 294, and the setbacks of the future buildings are also tied to the setbacks that were approved in PUD 294. And I've included the zoning map, and this is the outline of the area for the preliminary plat. And the 2018 plat was very similar to this, of course much larger, but it also showed C17L PUD and C17, as well as the R17 PUD area. The applicant is doing just R8 throughout this development for the preliminary plat. So he could have a significant greater density than what they are because they're going with an R8 within the plan unit development. And there are 8 conditions tied to this requested preliminary plat. And the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And I'm available for questions.
Questions for Tammy? No?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And it's more of a long-range view. Where is Atlas capable of widening to 4 lanes eventually? Only because the scattergun technique, if people are like, I don't want to go to Ramsey because I got all these people coming at me, can they jump? Will we be able to push them over to Atlas and take a little bit of the heat off Ramsey, which we already see and know very clearly?
Well, Chris Bosley has joined us tonight.
Oh,
so I
yay,
think that would be a
Chris.
great question for Chris.
That's a question for Chris. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll hold that for Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
No? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to have Chris Bosley come up and answer that question now?
I would like to, only because I
Okay,
know
I'll
what we're doing
Okay.
to Ramsey.
Presentation. Where's the presentation for? Do you want Chris to come up? Okay.
That'd be great.
Who's,
I think we'll have Chris answer that question before. We'll have Chris answer you for, yeah.
Yeah, and then you can slide in.
It's there now. Hello, Commissioners. Good evening. So your question about Atlas Road and its future improvements, the plan right now is just for 3 lanes, which does increase capacity because left turns move out of the way. And coincidentally, as I was sitting in the audience, I was just writing a grant application for Atlas Road, but it's for the portion that I'm seeking funding for is from Hanley down to Celtice Way. Most of the rest of that north of there already has the width available, but that we're trying to complete that whole section so that we'd have curb and gutter and 1 lane in each direction, bike lanes hopefully in each direction, and then a center turn lane.
Great.
uh,
Good answer.
Thanks.
Chris, on the staff report on traffic, I know we're looking into the traffic light maybe down the road at Wilbur and Ramsey at some point in time. I know that we had some discussion at one of our meetings a while ago regarding who should, who shouldn't. Can you touch on, if this happens, who will and who won't? Kind of share the expense in this traffic light
Well, currently, we have hired an engineer to design the signal, and they are working with Greenstone's engineer so that, trading drawings back and forth, so that Greenstone can get the underground work done before the intersection is built. In a few phases of Coeur d'Alene Place, when that is finally warranted, I should say, for that signal to go in, because until it connects to Moselle, there won't be much traffic, through traffic, or crossing Ramsey or anything like that. But once that connection is made, you'll see a lot more cut-through traffic on Wilbur, and including the signal that's going in at US 95 by ITD, and Wilbur is continuing across through that field down to Government Way. It's going to become a lot more busy. At that point, I would imagine that the city of Coeur d'Alene would be on the hook for putting in that signal. We do collect impact fees to pay for things like that, though I don't know that we have that much money right now, but as more and more homes are built, hopefully that nest egg grows enough to afford that.
So is there a projected date when it might kick in to, I mean, like phase 1, 2, 3 has to be done before the light gets put in there? Who makes that decision, since the city is kind of on the hook to flip the bill to pay for this light?
Well, I had asked Greenstone to provide some of that information in the form of a traffic study, but it's really hard to nail down exactly what year that'll occur. So I think this is just something we kind of have to watch and see as homes are built, as new phases come into construction, and try to time it like that. But there's no definitive year to say, like the year 2026 or
Right.
something like that would be the year that would have to go in, or phase 3 or anything like that.
But it would be the city's request at that time that you guys put the light in, because you're on top of seeing that there's a lot of building of new homes at that point, not so much on the developer to say, oh, we don't need the light at this point or anything. So it's the city's kind of call when the
Yeah,
light.
and I think really the determination is going to be when traffic can go from Moselle all the way to Ramsey
Okay.
through that corridor there, because then it'll be more than just the residents in these 6 phases of Coeur d'Alene Place. It'll be anyone who can use it.
All right,
And
so
I know that others in that area to the north are already looking for new ways to get out of that
Right.
area.
Okay, so it's kind of a spoke wheel, kind of a.
Right.
Everything connected.
Play it by ear, yeah.
Right, okay. Go ahead, Pete. you have a
But that's
question?
part of the city engineer's responsibility, is it not? Look at traffic counts and so forth, and it reaches a certain point, then you make recommendations for traffic light. Is that not right?
Right,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. And we do have all that information, we just don't know the timing of it.
And when the time comes and you do your job, you make your recommendation, it goes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Not at this time. Thanks, Chris, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. Kevin, I guess we have a little technical difficulty going on here, I think.
I think so, Mr. Chairman, so I'll wing it without the
Just state your
PowerPoint.
name and I'll swear you in.
Kevin
Do
Schneidmiller,
you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go right ahead, Kevin. Thank you.
All right, I'm here representing both the landowner and the applicant tonight in the matter of the preliminary subdivision S-1-20. Again, as staff has already stated, it's about 45 gross acres, 38 plus acres net. Lot sizes will range from 20 feet to 70 feet. We are, under our Coeur d'Alene Place PUD, allowed to have 20-foot wide lot and attached product, so the townhome will be a 20-foot wide lot. Our objective in this proposal is to create single-family lots within the currently zoned R17, C17, and C17L zone areas along Ramsey that staff depicted in their presentation. We view this as a re-entitlement of a portion of the subdivision action S-1-18. If you looked at that, and I had a slide, if you overlay the C17, C17L, and R17, A majority of these 220 lots were platted as part of the action back in 2018. I did as close an estimate as I could, and we're really requesting 113 additional lots over that 2018 action, understanding that from a technical standpoint, this plat is 220 lots. We also view it as a reduction in density. Again, under the 2018 approval that came before this body, we could request construction for over 400 units between the R17 and the C17 zoning areas, and both those zones allow residential multifamily type construction. Most of Coeur d'Alene Place is entitled under an R8 zoning designation, so that's what we see this as, even though we're not requesting a zone change. I can tell you that to date, in the last 12 years, I didn't try to go back further than that, but we're averaging about 3.74 units per acre from a gross standpoint. So we think this is very compatible with the existing Coeur d'Alene Place, and again, view it as a very much a reduction in density from what we're already approved for. It will have a trail system along Ramsey Road with approximately 45 feet of landscaping. Some of that will be within the right-of-way. There's a 30-foot dedicated tract for landscaping that will be dedicated to the Coeur d'Alene Place Homeowners Association. There's currently a trail along there. We agreed with city staff about 10 years ago to voluntarily put a recycled asphalt trail along there to make some connectivity till Coeur d'Alene got to this point, and so now we'll be perfecting that to a full section type of trail. The main streets that will be feeding this, again, it's already been stated. Wilbur is the main east-west connection. Ramsey is to the east of it, running north and south. And Moselle, which we've been perfecting off of Corsellis going south, which will eventually connect into the subdivision to the north side of Coeur d'Alene Place. The reasons we're requesting this change, it is going to allow us, everything you saw south of Wilbur will be an empty nester community. We've been very successful with those. We think they fill a very big need in the community. When this one is built out, and it's about 100 lots plus or minus, we will have constructed about 375 empty nester homes in Coeur d'Alene Place. So a significant percentage. One of the big advantages of those, besides filling a need, they do not impact the school district and schools. So we view that as a very positive thing, but they are also, very well liked. We do not designate them 55 plus legally, just the way the type of homes we build, the size of lot, it drives to that demographic, and they're all maintenance-free type situation. It also, with the townhome, we're going to be able to bring a little bit of an affordable type of housing to that, and we think that's important. And finally, this completes the design of the Coeur d'Alene Place PUD, which has been going on since 1995. So we anticipate build-out in the current market to be about 5 to 6 years. So with that, we believe it's consistent with the goals and the objectives of the Coeur d'Alene Place PUD. It, again, reduces the potential density from the previous entitlement action. And as I just stated, it reduces the burden on the public infrastructure such as school. Streets, water, and sewer infrastructure is consistent with the entitlement action in 2018. There's no significant changes to that. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. I have Ed Stanford would like to speak. Come on up, Ed. Take your time, no problem. And if I can have your name, and I'll swear you in.
Ed Stafford?
Do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Go right ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I live just south of the proposed development across Ramsey in Lake Forest West, which is a subdivision that's just about built out. There's 2-3 empty lots left in it. My interest here was to kind of piqued because I noticed in looking at the information that was available, what I wasn't seeing in this proposal compared to what's in our subdivision. More specifically with respect to landscape requirements and public access walkways that are part of the city code. I did get some answers in part that, for example, my understanding is that the city code has wording something to the effect that you have to have a pedestrian access every not to exceed 600 feet between them. But in this case, because this is a PUD, it doesn't necessarily apply, which seems kind of odd to me because this PUD is 25 years old and, you know, things change over a 25-year period. Requirements, the pedestrian walkway requirement wasn't even there 25 years ago, but maybe it should be implemented. There should be some way to amend some of the PUD requirements. I think I did get my question about landscaping along Ramsey answered. There's a 30-foot wide, I think, tract there, so I think we're good there as to what's going to happen. There's supposed to be, in the pedestrian way, there's supposed to be one that comes out onto Ramsey, which I believe is, find the drawing here. Yeah, it's comes off of, I can't read the name of the street. Chalet Loop, I believe. Anyway, it's supposed to be there and it doesn't show on the drawings or the layouts that are available for pedestrian walkway out onto it'd come out onto Ramsey there. So I had a question as to why that didn't show. And then I guess some of my other questions were answered, but I would like to make an offhand comment about the traffic light thing that came up. The conversation seemed to be centered on through traffic on Wilbur, when Wilbur connects across to Atlas. Well, if you live and use Ramsey and you're coming from the east or west and have to make a left-hand turn, for example, onto Ramsey, there are times it's almost impossible. With the traffic coming from Prairie on the north and from Hanley on the south, and the way the lights are timed, you can sit there a long, long time, and at rush hour, either in the morning or at evening when people are going home, you might as well just wait because it gets to be a real hassle. At Canfield, for example. So I just wondered, the comment is that maybe the light will need to come in a little bit sooner because as people are exiting this development, they're going to want to make a left or right-hand turn, and if there's no light there, that's just going to compound the problems. So I think that covers what I had to say. Thank you. If you have any questions back.
Hillary can comment on a few things here.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the item you talked about, the pedestrian connection and not having to block 600 feet or more than 600 feet. So the condition, it's on the screen, so it's number 3, and you did reference that, I believe. So the developer to construct a pedestrian connection from Cholet Loop to Ramsey Trail. So that is something that the developer has agreed to. It's not in the packet because these are conditions that have been added after reviewing the submittal. When they come back with the final plat, that will be on there. So we'll make sure there is a pedestrian connection.
So it'll be another round probably someplace.
Right, so the process is they submit a preliminary plat, we review that, and then the final plat is when it's more finalized, we review that to make sure it's consistent with the conditions.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
you.
appreciate it. I have one other sign up, it's a Chris and Melissa Jensen, they did not indicate. They have to leave. Okay. Kevin, do you wish to come back up and rebuttal anything or make more comments on anything you've heard from Ed?
I'll just make one quick comment. I should have clarified that at the end of my remarks. We agree with all the conditions that staff is recommending. We have further work to do with the engineering staff on the intersection of Wilbur and Ramsey. We've had multiple meetings. As Mr. Bosley indicated, we've been working with them. We will provide, as we're constructing some of those improvements, all the necessary underground to prepare for a future signal. So.
Okay. I will close public testimony at this time on this particular item and bring it to commissioners for discussion, a motion.
You want to make a motion?
What's that?
You want to make a
Yeah,
motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
Go for it, John.
So for S-120, this being a matter that's come before the Planning Commission tonight, February 11th, 2020, and there being present a person requesting approval of item S-120, a request for a preliminary plat for Coeur d'Alene Place 2020 PUD consisting of 189 single-family and 13 townhome lots in 6 phases, totaling 45 acres. Applicant is Greenstone Kootenai 2, location existing undeveloped parcels west of Ramsey Road, east of West Moselle Drive, south of Alp Street, and north of Hanley Avenue. Motion that we adopt the worksheet findings laid out, B1 through B6, as those background statements of fact, and that for B7A, that all of the preliminary plat requirements have been met, and that is based on the staff report that states that the city engineer has attested on page 3 that the all the preliminary plat elements have been met. B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, right-of-way easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are adequate. And again, that is based on the comments in the staff report that all of the associated departments have reviewed this and found that all of those attributes and provisions have been met without objection. B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all the subdivision design standards contained in Chapter 16.15 and all of the subdivision improvement standards contained in Chapter 16.40 requirements, and that is based on the staff analysis, page 8 of the staff report, that the plat will be in conformance with all of the adopted Coeur d'Alene Place PUD site standards. B7D, that the lots proposed in the preliminary plats do meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district, and that is based on the testimony we hear tonight and in the staff report analysis that the overall density of 4.48 units per acre is well below that allowed by the applicable zoning. So with that as order, conclusion, and decision, that we motion the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of the Greenstone Kootenai 2 for preliminary plat of approval as described in the application should be approved with the 8 conditions that I am not going to read, but the applicant has acknowledged and said he's okay with. That'd be the motion.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
I have a second. And before I call roll call, I just want to make a comment on, it's nice to see Greenstone finally phasing out of all the construction that's been going on since I've been here on that first subdivision, and I want to comment on my personal opinion, and nice job that you've done as a corporation in this town to provide housing and open space and parks and trails and connectivity and working with the city. So I thank you for doing that. It's my personal opinion. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, S-1-20 passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any other comments, or I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good evening.